Well, it looks like we're back to square one in the negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, or as President Trump so aptly put it yesterday, everyone should just stop. This is getting complicated.
They should stop the war immediately. You go by the battle line wherever it is, otherwise it's too complicated. You'll never be able to figure it out.
Now, the past few days have resulted in, once again, President Trump believing that Vladimir Putin actually wants peace and giving him a couple weeks to put together an in-person meeting in Budapest, of all places. Now, if it feels like we've been here before, it's because we have, like 6 times. I'm losing track at this point. Now, it didn't seem like this was actually the direction we were going. There were a lot of events leading up to these last couple days where it seemed like the United States was getting ready to maybe add sanctions, provide additional weapons to Ukraine, some sort of pressure on Russia. But then Trump had a phone call with Putin and everything changed. Now, the lead up to this started at a meeting with NATO earlier this week where Secretary Hegseth really kind of came out with some pretty strong language suggesting if there is not peace in this war, the United States and our military is prepared to do what is necessary. Here you go.
Now, if this war does not end, if there is no path to peace in the short term, then the United States, along with our allies, will take the steps necessary to impose costs on Russia for its continued aggression. If we must take this step, the U.S. War Department stands ready to do our part in ways that only the United States can do. We remain clear-eyed about the fact that the most effective deterrents to Russian aggression are, number one, a lethal, capable, and European-led NATO, and number two, a combat-credible Ukrainian military able to defend itself and thereby continue to deter Russian aggression along NATO's border.
I mean, look, I know the bar is pretty low for any sort of threatening statements coming out of our Pentagon over the course of the last couple months, but there we have it. Again, just a couple days ago, saying the United States and our military is prepared to inflict costs on Russia for not ending the war. Great. That's what we need to do. We need to pressure them to come to the table. Secretary Hegseth continued on the floor with Secretary General Mark Rutte, talking about how any day now we're going to see additional weapons flowing into Ukraine. Again, more talk of doing something to force a peace deal coming to fruition. Here we go.
Great to be here. And Mark mentioned it, firepower. That's what is coming. We expect it is coming from NATO. And it was a historic summit just a couple of months ago, brought about by the leadership of President Trump to say we need our allies to step up. And they did, and they have in those commitments. Now those commitments will soon translate into capabilities, which is the most important aspect of it. And one part of that, of course, is Pearl, is the initiative where European countries buy U.S. weapons, transfer to NATO for the fight in Ukraine to bring peace to that conflict. And if there's anything we've learned under President Trump, is the active application of peace through strength. You get peace when you are strong, not when you use strong words or wag your finger. You get it when you have strong and real capabilities that adversaries respect.
Now, we'll get into more details on that Pearl initiative here later in the video, but that was kind of the direction things were going. You know, the backdrop of this was the possibility of additional sanctions being layered on Russia, Tomahawk missiles maybe being sent to Ukraine, which clearly rubbed Russia the long way. And next thing we know, there was a phone call between Vladimir Putin and President Trump, and everything changed directions. Trump issued a statement following that call where he said, quote, "I have just concluded my telephone conversation with President Vladimir Putin of Russia, and it was a very productive one. President Putin congratulated me and the United States on the great accomplishment of peace in the Middle East, something that he said has been dreamed of for centuries. I actually believe that the success in the Middle East will help our negotiation in attaining an end to the war with Russia-Ukraine. President Putin thanked the First Lady for her involvement with children. He was very appreciative and said this will continue. We also spent a great deal of time talking about trade between Russia and the United States when the war is over. At the conclusion of the call, there will be a meeting. We agreed there will be a meeting of our high-level advisors next week. The United States' initial meetings will be held by Secretary of State Rubio, together with various other people to be designated. The meeting location is to be determined." Now, we understand at this point that the meeting location has been named as Budapest, which, of course, has a bit of history when it comes to Russia and Ukraine. The Budapest Memorandum, of course, having been violated, and one of the arguments as to why we need to be very careful and deliberate with how we set up any sort of future security guarantees with Ukraine. In fact, the White House was asked about the location here, of everywhere you could have possibly gone, why Budapest? And when the Huffington Post posed that question to the White House, the response from White House press secretary, he said, "Who suggested Budapest?" The White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, responded with, "Your mom." So not a lot of information on exactly why Budapest was picked here. Now, some details kind of behind the scenes of what may have transpired between President Trump and President Putin. Russian presidential advisor Yuri Yushakov said, quote, "Putin told Trump that Tomahawks will not change the situation on the battlefield, but will damage the relations between Russia and the United States and the settlement of Ukraine." And we saw that specific language coming from a lot of senior officials in Russia over the course of the last couple of weeks. As Tomahawks became more and more a conversation of will they actually be sent, numerous officials came out and said a couple different things. One, we don't know if these are nuclear armed or not, suggesting the ridiculous idea that the United States, President Trump, is about to give Ukraine nuclear weapons to carry out strikes inside of Russia. Come on, guys. Let's at least table that one for now. There was that, and then there was the whole shift over when it looked like it was actually going to happen, a complete shift over to these won't matter at all. It's just going to be a headache. It's going to make things worse. Foreign Minister Lavrov said, quote, "In this series of statements about the possibility of supplying Tomahawks, President Trump, among other comments, mentioned that he does not want escalation." Keep that word in mind, escalation. We're going to come back to it. Acknowledging that it would be an escalation, and a very serious one at that. Ukraine will no longer be involved here. This was simply a cause colossal damage to the prospects of normalizing relations between Russia and the United States and getting out of the complete deadlock in which these relations were driven by the Biden administration. So again, the framing by Russia there is this isn't going to do anything for the war, but it's going to make Russia-U.S. relations even worse. Now, the escalation piece is interesting because we're going to hear President Zelenskyy looking relatively downtrodden, I would say, after this meeting with Trump, echoing those exact same words. So you can see that actually had an impact on President Trump. Now, President Zelenskyy did arrive at the White House just yesterday, and it seemed like things were probably heading in the right direction. I mean, he arrived there, seemed like there were a lot of positive things yet to be discussed, but then, we got the news that nothing really is going to change. In fact, one of the reporters in the White House asked the question that we are all kind of wondering at this point: are you at all concerned, President Trump, that you're just kind of being led on here? We've seen this happen once or twice before. Here's President Trump's answer.
On your meeting with Putin, aren't you concerned that maybe the Russian president is trying to buy himself more time?
Yeah, I am. But, I've been played all my life by the best of them. And I came out really well. So it's possible, a little time. It's all right. But I think that I'm pretty good at this stuff. I think that he wants to make a deal. I made 8 of them. I'm going to make a 9th. I think he wants to make a deal.
I mean, let's be honest. He's being tapped along here, right? Like, everybody can see that. It's the same thing. It's 2 weeks. Russia gave up nothing here. There's nothing changed other than Putin called Trump and said, don't do the Tomahawks. That's not good. Let's meet. Let's find a place to meet. We'll have a meeting, you and I. And it's going to be another couple weeks, and then there's no ceasefire, and then there's no real progress in this world. We all know what's happening here, right? It's pretty obvious at this point. Quick note, meant to mention this earlier. Tip of the spear, landmine removal. Great guys over there. Ryan Henderson, they're in Ukraine removing landmines so farmers can do more of their work. Not sponsored, not affiliated with those guys at all, but have picked up some gear from them over the course of the past couple of years. I'll link the store where you can get this sweatshirt. They've got hats, t-shirts, all that stuff. Again, Ryan Henderson, Tip of the Spear guys, doing incredible humanitarian work. Now, one bit of a change in the White House, we started to see this during the course of the interviews here as they brought Preston into the room. It all of a sudden did start to turn what I would say is a little bit hostile. And there's a couple pieces here. Now, it's nowhere near like what happened back in February when Zelenskyy was essentially kicked out of the White House entirely. Far stretch from that, but some of these questions were just overly aggressive, maybe is the way to put it. We want the press to push, but give a listen to this one, essentially asking President Zelenskyy, what are you willing to give up? The United States is tired. Stop doing this. What are you going to do? And, my personal frustration watching this is like, that's a question for Putin. You can ask Zelenskyy, ask President Zelenskyy whatever you want, but let's keep in mind there is another party here that we also need to push that question on of what are you going to do to actually get to some sort of peace deal. Nonetheless, here is one of the reporters kind of pressing Zelenskyy on that. And I think Zelenskyy does a good job of keeping his calm, definitely learned from the February meetings, and providing a very coherent and accurate answer. Here we go.
President Trump, Kara Castronova from Lindell TV. And although I love asking you questions, today my question is for President Zelenskyy
Sure.
of Ukraine.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Our President Zelenskyy, President Trump, just brokered a peace deal in the Middle East that all Americans, both sides of the aisle, are very proud of. But to meet that deal, both sides had to make concessions. Our president has stuck out his neck in many ways to make a peace deal for your war as well. What specific concessions are you willing to make to end this war with Russia? Will you give up joining NATO? Americans have foreign war fatigue, and our president, as he said, we need our Tomahawks too.
To me?
Yes, you, President Zelenskyy.
Thank you very much.
That's some question, right?
So many questions in one. Thank you very much for your question. First of all, I think we need to sit and speak. The second point, we need ceasefire. Even now, you see in the Middle East, it's very difficult to hold ceasefire. Everywhere, in every war, it's very difficult. We want peace. Putin doesn't want. That's why we need pressure on him. We will speak with President today what we need. We understand what we need to push Putin to negotiation table. And as I said previously, so we are ready to speak in any kind of format, bilateral, trilateral, doesn't matter. Matter just peace. This is important. And we don't speak about NATO or NATO. For Ukrainians, it's very important. Of course, it's our decisions of allies to decide where we are.
But are you willing to give
Yes,
up
but the
joining NATO?
most important thing for people in Ukraine, which are under each day's attacks, to have really strong security guarantees. NATO is the best, but weapon is very important. Allies on our side is very important. And between us, for us, bilateral security guarantees between me and President Trump is very important. I don't know, we didn't speak with details about it, but this is the most important document because the United States is very strong.
Sir, President Trump. Peter?
So again, Zelenskyy really, I think, stayed on message there. It's about security guarantees. It's what happens when we actually come to some sort of agreement with Russia, no matter what that looks like. Now, I mentioned the hostility in the room there, and there's another one here that's kind of blowing up on the internet. I'm just going to present it because there's another piece of it here that I think is interesting. Secretary Hegseth wore a tie that, look, to be honest, it would not have caught my eye. I see the colors red, white, and blue. Folks have pointed out that this is in the order of the Russian flag, not in the order of the American flag. Again, to be honest, maybe I'm naive. I would have looked right past that and not really noticed. That's a whole other conversation. The important piece that I want to point out here is the Russians noticed and viewed that as a sign. And across Telegram channels, they're kind of celebrating this. It's a mix of mocking and making fun of the fact that the Secretary of Defense has what looks to be a Russian flag tie on during his meeting with Ukrainian President Zelenskyy. So a lot of Russians kind of viewed that as a troll. They liked it. They're celebrating it. One I wanted to point out here, actually, because it's not just like backwoods Russian bill bloggers with 1,000 followers or something. Kirill Dmitriev posted this right here, again suggesting that the tie is actually the Russian flag. He's the special presidential envoy on foreign investment and economic cooperation and has been pretty closely involved in all of the negotiations between the United States, Russia, and Ukraine in trying to bring about an end to this war. This is a senior official in the Russian government. And not only did he post, the suggestion that Hegseth was wearing a Russian tie, a Russian flag tie, but right underneath that, WWG1WGA, which had to look this up. That is an acronym for where we go one, we go all. That is straight up QAnon conspiracy. So again, whichever direction you want to take this, of trolling or joking or whatever, or serious, like stoking the fire there is Russia takes every opportunity, and I would say at the very least, pretty sloppy move to give Russia the opportunity to do something like that. Like just wear a simple tie that doesn't run that risk at all. But either way, following this meeting, President Trump put out another note kind of as a roll-up here saying, quote, "The meeting with President Zelenskyy of Ukraine was very interesting and cordial, but I told him, as I likewise strongly suggested to President Putin, that it is time to stop the killing and make a deal. Enough blood has been shed, with property lines being defined by war and guts. They should stop where they are. Let both claim victory. Let history decide. No more shooting, no more death, no more vast and unsustainable sums of money spent. This is a war that never would have started if I were president. Thousands of people being slaughtered each and every week. No more. Go home to your families in peace. And this is starting to lose me here. I mean, I'm frustrated start to finish with how this stuff went, but this is, it really starts to get the impression that we're just thrown in the towel. And I felt this very much at the beginning of the Trump administration when it was clear they were not going to reach a peace deal, of course, on day one. But then they gave the 100-day mark, and 100 days came and went, and there was no progress. It felt like, and we heard this from Secretary Rubio at the time, saying, we've got a lot of other things we can work on. We might just walk away. I'm getting those vibes again here because President Trump is essentially saying, hey, guys, just stop. The lack of understanding of the conflict is incredible. Like, neither one of these sides can just stop right now. Ukraine is continually and still looking for some sort of security guarantees. If they stop right now, why? They are actively killing Russians right now. They're actively striking inside of Russian territory, making it costlier and costlier for Russia to continue this war. And hopefully, ideally, prevent Russia from carrying out something like this in the future. So Ukraine has no incentive to just stop right now. They are under attack day in and day out. Russia, why would they just stop? They still have territory, specifically Donetsk, but also some other areas in the east and the south, they have claimed as rightfully theirs. It is not. But why are they going to stop right now and then go back to their people and say, we couldn't quite actually take all of the territory we claimed ownership of? None of their objectives have been met. Ukraine has a stronger military today, arguably, than they did when the war began. Certainly more technologically advanced, much more lethal, much more advanced. Russia has no incentive to stop. This is where all of the pushing is supposed to come from. This is what sanctions are supposed to do. This is what sending additional weapons and capabilities to Ukraine is supposed to do. It drives them, forces the two parties to come to the negotiating table. Simply saying, that's enough, guys, it's bad, I don't like it, stop. It's ridiculous. It's absurd to think that that is going to be the thing that actually gets us there. Now, you can see that this is not necessarily what President Zelenskyy was expecting when he came to the White House this week, and he gave a brief press conference following it. And I want you to pay attention to, first off, his demeanor. You can tell he's a little bit dejected here, but also the words he uses and what he decides to key in on here and how that ties into what we heard just a few moments ago in Trump's phone call with Putin, namely escalation. Here we go.
Then we spoke about also about long range, of course, and I want not to make statements about it. We decided that we don't speak about it because nobody wants, this United States doesn't want escalation and etc. So, this we will be out of the questions about it, out of the answers, sorry, about it. Also we spoke about Budapest. President shared with me their dialogue with Russian side. So we understand for us all the signals from Russians, they are not new, but we count on President, on his pressure on Putin to stop this war.
Mr. President.
So again, did you catch that? He said, we decided not to speak about it, the long-range munitions, saying the United States does not want escalations. And that's something we need to keep in mind when we're looking at this. This is not about, the escalation concern is not between Ukraine and Russia. The escalation concern is between Russia and the United States. And we have watched how time and time and time again, there has been a red line drawn by Putin, and it is about as stable as President Trump's 2 weeks warnings. They just come and they go, and then we continue on. Now, the United States, that's not without effort, right? There's been a lot of effort put in by the United States and our NATO partners to make sure that as we continue to increase Ukraine's capabilities, it is not crossing that line and making sure there's not a clear way for Russia to respond kind of over the top. So you can tell that as a part of this meeting, it was no more talking about this, no more pushing the long-range strikes. The U.S. does not want escalation. Now, this kind of plays into what I think is more and more this being presented as the U.S. is getting fed up with this. We're tired of the war, as White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said shortly after this meeting, saying the American people are tired. We're ready to move on. Here we go.
world. The president started the week flying to Israel and Egypt, came back within 36 hours to honor Charlie Kirk at the Medal of Freedom ceremony in the White House. And then the next day, he spends 3 hours on the phone with President Putin trying to bring this war to an end. The following day, today, we had President Zelenskyy at the White House, and the president had a 3-hour-long meeting with him in the cabinet room. And in both of these conversations with both Putin and Zelenskyy, they were cordial, but very frank. And the president of the United States has said to both sides of this war, this has been going on for far too long. Far too many innocent people have been killed. And the United States of America is growing very weary and tired of this war. Enough is enough. Both sides need to recognize the reality on the ground right now and come to a peace agreement, because President Trump's patience and the patience of the American people is growing very thin with this war. And so
now, it's whiplash. I got it. It's exhausting. I hate that we're at this spot where it looks like Ukraine probably cannot rely heavily on the United States going forward. Fortunately, I think they've probably been in that place for a while, and we have started to see some changes, namely in Europe and with other NATO countries, to that end. I mean, we had Polish Prime Minister Tusk just earlier today, following these meetings, put out a note saying, quote, "After President Zelenskyy's talks yesterday in the White House and with European leaders, one thing is absolutely clear. Europe's solidarity with Ukraine against Russia's aggression is today more important than ever." Now, one of the ways that we have seen this materialize recently was mentioned by Secretary Hegseth earlier in today's video, talking about the Pearl Initiative. And before showing you that, I want to pull up this chart here showing aid to Ukraine over the course, the averages over the course of the war so far. And you're going to see a very clear, significant drawdown in military aid, especially, if I'm reading this chart correctly, nothing from the United States in the months of July and August. Now, I do believe there's been some Patriot systems and or interceptors sent either in September or October. But again, that chart there, July and August. Now, if I'm reading this chart correctly, and assuming the data here from the Kiel Institute is accurate, that means that anybody that contributed to one of our fundraisers in the last couple of months actually provided more military aid to Ukraine in July and August than the United States government. So thank you. It's actually going to good use. We just got a picture yesterday of the Azov guys, the international battalion over there. A lot, like $75,000 of the $110,000, I think, was delivered, already being put to use. Those guys are utilizing it on the Eastern Front. A lot of Azov, 1st Azov Corps, of course, involved in the Pokrovsk direction. So just know that. You should be proud of that. You should be proud of yourselves. It's an absolute honor that I hate that the U.S. military aid has fallen that much, and there are some areas where it's being replaced. But what a war that all of us together, you all, contributed more July and August than the U.S. military did to Ukraine in terms of dollar amount of equipment. That's wild. Now, where this shift is happening is under something called the Pearl Initiative, P-U-R-L. And this stands for Priority Ukraine Requirements List. It's the most recent agreement put together between Trump and Secretary General Mark Rutte. And the idea here is that the United States will sell equipment to our NATO partners that will then be earmarked for them to send to Ukraine. And there's a priority within this list. So it's not just everything. It's certain equipment that could be utilized specifically in the war. So on this chart, you'll see that a couple countries, or we'll pull that chart back up here, you can see the Pearl Initiative is starting to fill a little bit of that gap, but it's got a long ways to go. And look, the United States sent a ton of military aid, so it's going to take a real effort to, backfill that. But what we are seeing so far is that at least 12 countries have joined onto the Pearl program: Belgium, Canada, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Germany, Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, Slovenia, and Sweden. And the last tally I saw here is that through this program, those allies have already committed over $2 billion, with another $1.5 billion expected in October, saying that the first 4 packages include missiles for Patriots and HIMARS, as well as other priority equipment. So this is the new model that is being put forward, and it's now in place, where the United States is not going to be selling weapons necessarily direct to Ukraine, although I feel like that's probably still on the table. We're certainly not going to be donating any weapons to Ukraine anytime soon, but we are making available a lot of weapon systems to sell to our European partners that can then go directly to Ukraine. There's a lot of details here that I don't have yet. Some questions that I have around this specific program is, are we manufacturing more of these? Like, are we plussing up the supplies in the United States to make them more readily available? Are we providing any sort of incentive? Think about those Patriot interceptors. Any one of these countries, I would think, could just buy them now and use them now for that has Patriot systems. Is there a discount involved here, or are we expediting the deployment? What is making countries come into this program to buy it? The only thing that stands out to me right now is some of these countries may be able to purchase equipment that they otherwise would not be able to. Again, with the Patriot system, if there's one of these countries that maybe doesn't operate it, of course, we wouldn't sell them interceptors. Maybe under this program, we are selling them those things that are then directly routed to Ukraine. But either way, it's something, I would say, a step in the right direction. But big picture, 2 more weeks. We'll see where this goes when Putin and Trump supposedly meet in Budapest. But that's all we got for now. Of course, if you find value in these videos, please consider becoming a patron. That's the best way to support the channel. The link to Patreon is in the description below. But thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.